Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Psychology and Spirituality, a Bridge to a Better Life discussion. I'm your host, Marcia Trajano. With me are Dr. Anahy Fonseca, my good friend. I will call you Anahy, Jussara Korngold, and Anne Sinclair. Thank you so much for joining us today. And today's episode will be focused on face, sorry, facing consciousness. And I wanted to let you know that this episode was brought to us by our friends at AMI Brazil. AMI Brazil is an association of spiritist health professionals. It was founded in 1995. And if you're interested in learning more about this organization, please do visit them. Unfortunately, I believe the site is in Portuguese. It is called amebrasil.org.br. Today's Psychology and Spirituality program is also sponsored by United States Spiritist Federation, TV Mansão do Caminho, the International Spiritist Council, and we have special contributions from many different Spiritist organizations. So thank you all. Make sure before we get started to hit subscribe if you haven't already done so. If you're ready there to check out other channels, you can see us at spiritist.us. So, welcome, Anahy. It is good to be here with you today. We will be listening for you, but as a group of friends who are here to discuss psychology and spirituality, we were going to talk and chat and comment on your thought-provoking ideas about consciousness, right? We talked about how can we achieve a higher level of consciousness? How can we become that integral human being? If you are listening, if you are interested in knowing more, please check out the following books that bring light to this topic that we're talking today. The Integral Human Being, specifically chapter 8 is a good one. The Conscious Being and the Awakening of the Spirit. But with that, Anahy, please take it away.
Thank you, Marcia. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you all and my good friends. And I'll be talking today, so as Marcia told everybody, about human beings actually facing consciousness. So, how we develop our consciousness? How can we evolve as human beings? How do we actually evolve as human beings? And I will be talking about a wonderful book by Joanna de Angelis and in the mediumship of Divaldo Pereira Franco. And the book is called The Integral Human Being. So, according to Joanna de Angelis, the most important moment in human beings' evolutionary process happen when they acquire consciousness and actually conscious to discern good from evil, truth from imposture, right from wrong, continuing on the upward march that one day will lead us all to angelitude. So we need to discern all of these facts of life, of our inner psychic life, right, to evolve our consciousness. So when Joanna talks about the birth of consciousness, she says that anthropologically and historically, the balanced survival of human beings in our society has always been linked to the idea of a central myth from which the ethical values that sustain their activities and their balance are inspired. and that every time an adverse factor interfere with human needs, discrediting the one who synthesized their aspirations, human beings head toward chaos and attack and disturb each other, actually, seeming to have lost their way. I don't know if you, my friends, want to comment, and this is very actual, right? Very real, and also very is happening here in our modern times. I don't know if you'd like to make any comments.
Yes, I would love to. Thank you, Anahy. And the first one, it's actually, I'm going to open this question to our panel here, which is the idea that you started by saying something that is that idea that according, that Joanna brings, that we see very well described in Spiritism. So according to Spiritism, um, in the entire body of work, right? We live in a world of trials and expiations. So, from that perspective, we are transitioning to what you call that state of angelitude, right? To Joanna de Angelis. So, from that perspective, and I love what you said, Anahy. You mentioned, of course, this is using or referencing Joanna de Angelis' words, but it's the idea that the evolutionary process goes through from your conscience to discern from not discerning anything and now discerning what is the difference between good and evil, truth and untruths, right and wrong, so on and so forth. So maybe we can talk a little bit about what does it look like? Do we just a flip of a of a switch? Do we get to become angels? Do we when we move on, right, during that moments of post death of our bodies, we become Saint Marcia or whatever? How does it work? Can we talk about it? And then we can perhaps tackle the idea of myths that you also talked about. Anyone would like to talk about this sense of evolution?
And Jussara, would you like to comment before I answer?
Yeah. I would just say that, like everything, we can take nature as our
Mm-hmm.
example. That everything in nature just transitions in a natural way, and we also progress in a natural way. We are not going to go to sleep and wake up an angel. It will be a process. When we get a tree, let's say an oak tree, and we just have that little oak acorn, you
Mm-hmm.
know, the potential for the whole tree is there. But we need to plant it and we need to look after it, and it goes through the wind and it goes through the seasons, and it goes growing and growing and growing till it becomes a marvelous oak tree that will last hundreds of years. So we can see, if we look at nature, we can see examples that can guide us of how things happen. And I think that our evolution is like that as well. And we also are subjected to the rain and the wind and all the difficulties that come our way, but we carry on developing. So I
Love
think
it.
that idea, it fits for me with
Mm-hmm.
what you look at nature and say, okay, so we go step by step. So that also for me is very consoling, because if I'm not perfect today, I will not be perfect tomorrow, but
Mm-hmm.
step by step we'll get there. So it just gives us a little bit of, takes away that anxiety of why aren't I better already? Why aren't,
Mm-hmm.
why aren't I an angel now? No, step by step, we will all get there.
Yes, absolutely. And that idea that I was just talking the other day with Jussara about being work in progress, right, Jussara? We're we are not there, but we're getting there. Therefore, let's be kind to ourselves. Let's practice a little bit of self-love. Anahy, do you want to comment on that notion of becoming what we're not there yet?
Yes, I totally agree with Anne. It's step by step.
Hmm.
And there is a paradox because the whole is inside of us, and we are part of the whole, a totality, the transcendent God, as uh, if you want to call it like this. So the thing is that we are in the spiritist knowledge. We are spirits reincarnated and using this material world to evolve, to learn. So we are going to see. I don't want to give everybody spoilers, but anyway, so we are living in the material world, right? So we are in a world of we are um, like in space and time, in time when we are here,
Mm-hmm.
and we are in the material. So we
Mm-hmm.
are in a dual paradox,
Mm-hmm.
because we are spirit and we are matter when we are here. So this duality, this constant conflict, okay, makes our psychic life very dual. We have lots of opposites. That's why Joanna tells about that we have to learn to discern good and evil, for instance,
Yes.
and it takes time. And also we have to do this like individuals, but also in a collective way. So it takes time. There's a lot of history going on, right? The history with big H, and so we need a lot of incarnations, right? The spiritist knowledge tells us that, to go little by little, as Anne said, step by step. We are not going to be angels in one life,
Uh-huh.
but we go step by step, and we our light each time is brighter. And not giving spoilers, but this means that we are light and we are shadow, because we are
Mm-hmm.
spirit and matter. So we have to learn what's light and what's shadow. We have to turn on the lights within ourselves to illuminate the shadow, and to integrate these different parts.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a wonderful metaphor that Anne brought, that to be, this big tree, to express all of our uh, spiritual nature, we have to go little by little. I don't know if Jussara wants to make any comments.
Yeah, I was thinking along the lines of, and first of all, thinking how great it is for us to have a name, right? So now it's not that I am a voyager, not knowing where am I going to get. So that there is this whole process, this whole trip that I have to be taking, that I will be taking, and it's going to take me to a safe port. And along this journey, I will be, increasing in knowledge, in discernment, as you said, being able through experience to separate what is good and what is bad, and and so I think that the idea, one of the points that Annie mentioned, that it is, be patient with
Mm-hmm.
yourself. Of course, it's nature doesn't go by leaps and bounds, and we don't as well. It's a whole process that we have to go. So this idea that I will be coming, or I will reach a state of angelitude. It's quite comforting, really. Now I look at me with all my flaws, but already learning and growing in a process, and saying to myself, you know what? Calm down. Everything is going to be okay. You will have enough time to go into this journey. Just go step by step. It's baby steps.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. This is great. Can I go ahead and flip to what you were talking, Anahy, which is you mentioned Joanna de Angelis introducing to us in the book, The Integral a human being, she introduces the idea of the birth of conscious, right? She says that she said that oh, anthropologically, historically, et cetera, we needed, we got to that moment, and then you mention that there is a need for that idea of a myth. So before we go any further, because I know you have lots and lots to talk to us, Anahy, but could we maybe, could you maybe tell us what are myths? Why are they so important? Can
Great.
we maybe give an example of a myth, or perhaps we can even, as a group, talk about when did we lose them? What happened? But go ahead, Anahy, if you don't mind.
Great, fantastic. Because I was going to tell everybody
Mm,
just to think about. We live in times very difficult times, right? Happening a lot
mhm,
of things happening, and all this. We have the social medias. We have this crisis value. We say values that we don't. Sometimes we have difficulty discerning what's good and not good, and what's not that good for me. So people are kind of really, sometimes they feel lost, a lot of depressions, a lot of anxiety nowadays. All this technology, and how do we use it? How do we use it in an ethical way? How do we
mhm,
use all these possibilities that technology brings us without losing ourselves, without losing the connection with our inner selves? Okay. So this is, I think, what Joanna says when she said, I'm going to answer what are myths. But just
uh-huh,
for you to understand that it's so important when she says that we all, peoples of all times, need
mhm,
a central myth from which the ethical values that sustain their activities and their balance are
mhm,
inspired.
mhm,
So imagine if we lose that. But what are myths? So myths are our sacred stories, we can say, some, in a very simple way. We have a definition, for instance, that it's very simple, that myths are narratives of a symbolic and imagery nature that evolve with the historical and ethnic conditions related to a given culture, and that seek to explain the origin of things. So
mhm,
imagine that we always uh, want to know, who am I, what I'm doing here, where I'm heading towards, right? And so our origin, and what is the purpose of everything. As a psychiatrist and an analyst, I can tell you we have been researching a lot of religions and spirituality and mental health, as I told you before. And we say that people are much healthier and much more mature, psychologically speaking, when they have purpose, when they know what their purpose in life is, or are, and when they know what I'm doing here, and when they wonder, at least wonder, try to find out, okay, but from where do I come? Where am I
mhm.
heading to? Okay, we gave everybody spoilers because we said someday we are going to be angels. We're going to evolve so much that we are going to be, really light beings. But how do we get there, as you
Mhm,
were wondering? So people need this central myths. They need, okay, in our culture, in a given culture, in a given time of history, okay, this group of people what are where do they come from? How do we explain that they are here? What are their purpose? So the thing is that when we lose that, for and Joanna said, because of adverse factors, she used
Mm-hmm.
this word, that interfere with human needs, with our
Mm-hmm.
sacred stories, then maybe we start heading toward chaos and attack each other, and disturb each other, as many times we see nowadays some people doing to each other. So, like wars, things like that. Actually, in the history of humankind, has always been like that. We have some very deep crises, wars, empires, this and that, and then people have to learn something about that
Mm-hmm.
and create a new myth, because otherwise they destroy each other. Okay, but each step, as you say, individually and also collectively, takes us to a higher step, and we learn that it's not okay, to do bad things to each other. It's not okay, war. We need peace. We need love, that we have to forgive our enemies, and all that the gospel, for instance, tells us, right? So we have uh, different light beings,
Mm-hmm.
teachers, as Joanna, light teachers, as Anne said once to me, that come to bring us, and to remind us, and to bring us back to the path of growing together. And so I would say that Jungian psychology, we call depth psychology, and Joanna talks a lot about Jung concepts, right? Because Jung talks about the soul, and he
Mm-hmm.
brings back the soul to psychology in academic terms. So, and we know that for Jung, myths and dreams, like in fairy tales, for instance, they are in a very deep part of the unconscious that Jung calls the collective unconscious. So when we are talking about myths, we are talking about a shared sacred history. Why story? Why is that story sacred? Because, as Joanna tells us, it contains the values, the sacred values, the sacred material, let's say, psychic material, that the group of people that are in this culture has learned together. The We could say the spiritual path that we share as a culture. And also, I think it's very important that one of Joanna's sentence in this book, that she says, after the storm, so
Mm-hmm.
after we all get in a crisis, its undestroyed remnants emerge, giving rise to a new ideation, and a creative myth appears, filling the gap left by the previous one. That's why we evolve little by little. Remember that I talked about the paradox and duality when we are here, right, in matter. So the thing is that this destruction and rebirth, like death and rebirth, are ancient themes, archetypal themes in the depths of our psyche. I don't know if this is very complicated. Please interrupt me.
I will right now, like before we move on, because there's so much to unpack here, everyone. So, if you will, I love what you're going and stitching together Joanna de Angelis and Carl Jung and any other you know experts and thought uh, those who brought us such revolutionary thoughts in psychology, depth psychology, right? But what I wanted to perhaps is ask here before we move on, because you use the word, Anahy, archetype. So let's talk about archetype. But before that, we talk a lot about myth and the potential harm of a society without the myth, right? So what happened? Did any can Anne or Jussara or you and I tell us a little about what happened? Did we really lose our mythology, right? We don't have access to Greek mythology or the Norse mythology, for example. But what about us? We all are here in modern Western society. Have we replaced that really formal myth that we learned when we went to school to different type of source of that sacred story? Yes,
Let,
go ahead.
let me go back here to 101 psychology, okay?
Yeah.
So, and uh, I wanted to have this idea of myth very clear in my mind. So you were
Mhm.
talking about the changing in times, the story that we are connected. So could we say that the different periods that we pass in our history, empires that have risen and fall, and I don't know if the mythological beings or history or stories that we have about the pantheon in Greece as well, if all of that apply or not, if I'm completely going in a different direction.
Okay, Jussara, can you just ask me again, please? Because I was paying attention to you, and as I told you, my mind just went to an example of myths that Marcia was talking to me.
No,
Would that work, Ju? Would that
yeah,
work?
no,
Can
absolutely. It's something very going back to the basics, okay? Because we many of us here are or that are are really going to be following us and are following our this uh, podcast like life. We are not that much familiar with the terminologies, the depth of this the psychology that we all have. So I was thinking, from what I understood that you said, the myth is going to be something that symbolic things that are going to be representative to us, to our beliefs. And so throughout history we had empires and with their way of thinking and worshiping beings, and that was renewed even sometimes with this period of crisis because of any kind of or a hurricane or volcanoes destroy them. So I wanted to know if this is what we are talking about, is like the basis of our society, or and also if we could say that the mythological beings from ancient Greece and Rome and the Pantheon is in the same line, or if it doesn't have anything to do with what you're trying to.
No, no, it's
In other
very
words, we're confused, Anahy. We are confused. So tell us, give us some
examples.
examples, and because this is a lot of good stuff, everyone. So go ahead, take it away.
No, it's good because if you are confused, I imagine that everybody's confused. When I started studying this, because I was a Freudian psychiatrist before, I got confused myself because people have to understand that Jung, yes, yes, because Jung goes deeper in the unconscious. Freud went to the personal unconscious, the material there is the ego represses, okay? and is all in our impulses, drives that the ego doesn't want to connect. So it represses, use the ego's, the mechanism of defense, and then it stays, all this material stays in the personal unconscious. But Jung goes deeper. That's why Joanna is using Jungian terms, okay? And he gets to a point where he say, well, we all have we are a brotherhood of men and women, human beings. So all the experiences, everything that we've learned, all the ways to do something, it's imprinted in our spirit. This is Joanna, actually, because Jung says talks about the archetypes. He just says that analyzing dreams and vivid imaginations and even hallucinations of his patients, because he was a psychiatrist. He said he gets to a point of all these images and themes make a very collective unconscious. He gets to the bottom. It's not the bottom because it's not, we don't know the limit, but of a shared part of the unconscious that is our spiritual and psychic heritage, okay, that we all share as human beings. And okay, so when he gets to this point, he found how did he got this idea? Because he found studying myths, fairy tales, dreams, okay, paying attention to these sacred stories, like Jussara was saying, oh, what about the Greeks and their mythologies? Everything in the Greeks times, okay, they didn't know anything about psychology, actually, but Socrates and Plato, they knew about the soul. They even talked about the soul's journey and evolution and things like that. So they knew that everything that we learn stays with us throughout different journeys of the soul. So the idea of our luggage, let's say the archetypes, these ancient types that are deep within our psyche, forming the collective unconscious, that it's our human potentials, that it's going to express our spiritual and psychic potential that is going to be expressing itself in a different way to each one of us, okay? And how did Jung got to this point? Observing myths from every different culture. He was a very knowledgeable man, and he traveled a lot. He had a lot of culture, knew a lot of languages. So he studied many, many myths, many fairy tales, many dreams. We calculate, some of his very close analysts, friends, calculate that he is the scholar, the person that analyzed the greatest amount of dreams, almost like 80,000 dreams during his lifetime. 80. So paying attention to all these imagery themes, okay, and the myths of different people. He says, now I'm going to give an example. For instance, the hero myth, that I know that Marcia wants to talk about some movies. I'll give you the word. But for instance, the hero myth is analogous to the development of consciousness, because the hero in every culture, in different stories that people talk to each other in this, in the East and the West, okay, the hero is that character that sacrifices himself or herself for the collective. Sometimes it's not a celebrity, okay? Celebrities are not heroes because the hero is all about self-sacrifice. Sometimes they are not known throughout his or her lifetime. Their story, are told to different people, and then they get to be known later on in life after their death many times. Okay, so we have different characters, let's say, but we could call them light teachers from the East, from the West, that give this example of self-sacrifice, of a life lived, giving example of those values that we were saying, that give us the possibility of the growth, growing, and the growth of the soul, if we can say like. So these are the heroes, and they are part of our sacred stories, because we say they open the path for all of us. So we are never alone. There are a lot of people coming, that have been around here before of us. There will be a lot of people after us. But how are we all connected? Through our collective unconscious, through this. I like very much when Jung says that the archetypes are, like footprints of the transcended deep within our psyche.
Love it. Love it. Love it. This is beautiful, beautiful. So let's pause for just a second. Maybe Anne, do you want to comment on
Yeah.
all this amazing, amazing discussions brought by Anahy?
Yeah. So I was listening to Anahy, and thank you so much for bringing such clarification. And I was thinking about, like, well, I'm very much a being of the 20th century, although we're in the 21st century. I was brought up, and most of my life was in the 20th century. And I reflect back, and it was a very materialistic century. And I wonder if we had a certain disconnect from the sacred, from the soul, and we were very focused on the material, because that seems to me like my youth and my friends and everything like that. We were like throwing away all the old and all the things. Oh, these are silly things from the people in the past. We are modern people. We thought at the time, and we thought that these silly stories, they have no value for us. But then we ended up without meaning in our lives, perhaps. I don't say everybody, but a lot of people perhaps in Western society threw away the sacred stories and didn't realize the value and how they are part of us. We can't throw them away, but we've ignored them perhaps. I thought that was quite interesting, because I never sort of thought about that before. And it's like even dreams, like people say, oh, dreams are we're saying, oh, just silly, it means nothing, or you're just processing your day. But no, it's got all kinds of imagery, communication coming from your deeper self. So I think this is something that I'm finding by studying Joanna de Angelis, is opening up to me this possibility of considering that I am much more than just my body. And it is a slow awakening for me. But I was just reflecting about that.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the comment. I really appreciate that. And when we talk about all that is brought to us, and I really, really appreciate that, our tenants, and I think, and it's more than your generation. I think we're in the same generation, by the way. It's the West, right? So think about perhaps post World War II, and that desire to live life, and all that we brought with us is kind of, oh, that's just something, it's not tangible. in our material experience. But I think, and I agree with you 100%, that Joanna brings that to us. And I invite everyone who's listening to us right now, please, please, please take the time to get to know Joanna de Angelis. But anyways, any additional comment, Anne or Jussara or Anahy?
I wanted to tell you before, because I know we are kind of in the end and there's so much to talk about. So we should already invite people to the next.
Yes.
But I wanted to get this comment that Anne did, that I think it's so important because it's a testimony of an era that I think we are in the 21st century, going to the next step, okay? Because the previous one that we were in, I'm also in the same, I lived in the same period and I'm living here with you. We are in a transitional phase, right? And I just wanted to tell people and you all, and it's so important what Anne said, that for Jung, the myths are their symbolic, with their symbolic construction, would have the role of mediating the relationship between conscious life and the unconscious. So you see how important it is. And in this mediation, a connection is established with the archaic memory of humanity. So the archetypes that we were talking previously. So in this sense, for myths to fulfill their purpose, they have to be experienced, lived, right? So when Anne says that her generation kind of lost contact, because we are kind of children, we are a result of a very destructive beginning in the past century with the 2 world wars. Okay, just to talk about a very storm, a very ugly storm that involved everybody. And I just wrote quickly an example, and I think it fits very well with Anne's the testimony that she gave to us of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, that I know a lot of people that are listening to us have read, have seen the movies, right? And a lot of different adaptations of Lord of the Rings. So this epic, for instance, in high fantasy novel, Tolkien wrote between 1937 and 1949, right in the Second World War, and he had participated in the First World War. So can you imagine a person that has seen all of, he was a scholar and an author, right? And had participated in something a storm so ugly as the First World War, being alive and conscious of the Second World War, what was going on. So I think that we could think of Lord of the Rings as a modern myth of our times, right? Because he's using many symbols, as for instance, the rings of power, right? And to talk about the struggle of many peoples from a world called Middle Earth that everybody knows. I'm not giving spoilers at this point. To destroy the one ring, okay, that could control and have the power over all those peoples, created by the Dark Lord Sauron, okay, to rule the other rings and peoples. And in this novel, there are many archetypal themes, ancient themes that come every time that we are developing consciousness as human beings. Many of these themes appear again. As for instance, reversed quest, the struggle between good and evil, death and immortality. This is the central, actually, for Tolkien, the central theme of Lord of the Rings. Fate and free will, we are always struggling with these concepts. The addictive danger of power, isn't that modern, unfortunately? As well as elements like hope and redemptive suffering that we were talking about in the hero myth. So I just wanted to give this example and say that, and remind Anne and everybody else, when Joanna says that after the storm, Anne and everybody else that are listening to us, something emerge. Okay, there is something. Remember the opposites that I was talking about. So there's always something deep in our psyche that it's the opposite of all this suffering that is going to emerge. Believe it, because it's the development of our consciousness. And then a new ideation, as Joanna says, and a creative myth appears, filling that previous gap and take us closer to that state that you were all talking about of angelitude that we would love to achieve someday. I think we can stay here.
Yes.
So
Yes,
that
I love that. So thank you. We had a wonderful, wonderful time together this past 45-ish minutes, talking about myths and talked about this amazing work that Joanna de Angelis and many others brought to us, to humanity. And with that, I want to say thank you. And I want to say to all of us, we'll pick up in our next episode from the hero journey. Okay, Anahy, you know I want to talk about it. So
yeah,
we'll pick up from Joseph Campbell and perhaps some of the amazing work that he has brought to us, and how potentially I can bet money that you have heard of Joseph Campbell and some of the things that he brought in the concept of the hero. So thank you, everyone, and I'll see you next time.